Knew that I was drawn to the craft of dentistry, but maybe what also drew me was the desire to become a solo practice owner. Maybe I saw them as one and the same. I saw beauty in the craft, but I also saw the draw to be a business owner, to create my office in the image that I wanted to do it, and to be both responsible for the great days, but also responsible for the challenging ones as well. And so.
Teach me something, Uncle Money.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Practice Prosperity. We have a dentist, and we've had dentists on before, but he's going to touch on things like increasing the value-add services that you provide, also utilizing technology in your practice, and really thinking about the location of your practice, where you want to locate in inner city, suburbs, or more in a rural area. We're going to discuss all these things. I think it's going to be value-added, and most importantly, we're going to get his story. So welcome, Dr. Trent Neisen.
Hey, good to have you here. Thanks for having me on here, Randall, and I'm glad to be a part of your show here. And like I said, my goal is to bring some value to your listeners and share a bit of my story.
Awesome. If you don't mind, can you please, introduce your practice, the clients you serve, and maybe something that may be unique about how you serve your clients?
Yes, absolutely. So, like I said, my name is Dr. Trent Neisen. I practice in Willmar, Minnesota. It's about 100 miles west of Minneapolis. My practice is Authentic Dental of Willmar. That's kind of the rebrand name that I gave it. And I bought the practice in 2020. What makes our practice unique? I've invested a lot of time, energy, and training into advanced procedures, and I think it's been a very rewarding endeavor for not only the services I can provide for the patients, the craft that I'm able to do, and well as also what it's done for me personally. So some of the special things that we do a lot at our office are implants, from just placing single implants to like this week, I did a full upper arch of implants, and immediately loaded temporary teeth, all on 4 or all on X. And kind of the new frontier of advanced service that I'm just getting into is starting to provide IV moderate sedation for patients. So those have been things that have served me well to this point, but also allow us to kind of provide, like I said, something special that's not as common. It's taken a lot of time, training to get here, but I'm very grateful for where we're at currently.
Awesome. I like that. So for somebody who, let's say, in college and they're thinking about becoming a dentist, explain your journey. What did you have to do to actually become a practicing dentist?
It's a great question. And I actually just had an undergraduate student shadowing me this past week. It's a long road. And I think maybe young students feel that it's an impossible journey, or it's like trying to climb Mount Everest if you're, say, a high school student or an undergraduate student, of what it takes to become a practicing dentist. But I think the biggest thing is it's just a series of small steps, and it takes just grit to not quit. It takes the grit to not quit. So the road to becoming a dentist involves usually 4 years of undergraduate studies. Usually sometimes it's biology, chemistry, something that's at least going to align with prerequisites that you need to take to then apply into dental school. You apply, and getting accepted into dental school, it's another 4-year journey of starting with books and lectures to working on mannequins all the way through completing. And then I ultimately ended up doing 1 additional year of training following that. So I did what was called an advanced education in general dentistry. My primary goal with that was to start to learn the implants and some of the things that I do currently. So, start to finish was kind of a 9-year journey to get the DDS behind my name. But I think when people are starting that journey, it might seem so intimidating, but really it's just got to be a series of one step in front of the other. What do I got to do this week, this month, this semester? And before you know it, the time goes, and I've been out, it'll be 7 years now. But I wouldn't have, talking to that student this week, it was worth, every leg of the journey. It seemed like it was never going to end, but I'm grateful for every step that I took along the way.
So you mentioned that you decided to take an extra year of study. Who was whispering in your ear? What was going on in the thought process of deciding, hey, I want to do this additional year instead of going directly into practicing?
I think it's always a tough decision that a lot of dental students make. After 4 years of study, you think, man, I need to start working. I need to start earning money. But just deciding to pursue that extra year, that advanced education in general dentistry was probably the best decision probably the best first decision I made. And that really came from not so much maybe somebody telling me to do it, but what I was drawn towards. In dental school, we didn't get a lot of exposure to implant placement or the surgery part. We had a little bit of restoring the teeth. And so I just felt called. I said, you know what? I want to be the one who learns implant surgery, and I want to be the one who places the implants and finishes the teeth and does the whole thing. And so that led me to starting to think about, like I said, what kind of program would start that implant education journey for me. And just to be able to do that in a setting where I did get paid a small amount to go do this, but to be able to make my primary focus that year after graduation to learning versus when you get right out and you start working, it's harder to learn. You're learning about, being a private practice general dentist, but it's hard to learn a lot of these advanced procedures if you go right into a busy practice. So that's the best advice that I could give on the subject. It's a great starting tool. It's not the only way to learn implants and advanced things, but it was a great one for me.
A dentist has a decision. They can, go work for a large dental practice, support a smaller practice, or go out on their own. What was inside of you, or was it always inside of you to be an entrepreneur?
I think it was always there. I knew that I was drawn to the craft of dentistry, but maybe what also drew me was the desire to become a solo practice owner. Maybe I saw them as one and the same. I saw beauty in the craft, but I also saw the draw to be a business owner, to create my office in the image that I wanted to do it, and to be both responsible for the great days, but also responsible for the challenging ones as well. And so, yeah, I just maybe saw them as both. I'm not saying I was never a person who couldn't work for somebody else who didn't play well in the sandbox with others, but I just maybe always had this draw to mostly be a solo dentist and do my own thing. And yeah, it was just there. It's maybe hard to explain where it came from. I think it was just kind of there when I decided to pursue this path.
Awesome. Now, you went a unique way, which I'm really excited to talk about. You decided to purchase a practice. So from the beginning, when did that idea first come to your head, and the process of executing a purchase of a practice?
Just like you said in your previous question, the drive was always there. And it's probably where the actual like the rubber met the road was later on. So I finished my schooling in 2018. I did the 1 year AEGD program that finished in 2019. And as I was finishing that program, I started to make contact with a dentist who the initial goal was to learn from him and to buy him out. And ultimately, things didn't pan out the way either of us wanted to in that first relationship. So I ended up working for him for 1 year. And it was ultimately at that point that I decided myself, but also with my wife, that we were ready to begin the process of searching for our own. So after 1 year of work as an associate dentist in a private practice office, we made that decision that, you know what, I think we're ready to take the plunge and to go out on our own and to try this thing. And I'm not saying when we made that decision that we had everything figured out. We did not. But a quote that I love is sometimes you have to take the leap and you build the wings on the way down. And once we made the decision to dive into private practice ownership, it really started with looking at practices for sale. So it just started with a wide and broad search of listed practices that were available, starting looking at them, starting to use resources that I had at the time to start evaluating them. Looking at a practice, how much it's producing, and maybe starting to sift through a little bit of, is this one to worth pursuing or not, as well as, where would be a place that we would want to live. And we just started combing through. Step one of this whole process was combing through all the brokered listings. That was step one. And then ultimately the story will continue to show where we wound up, where we did.
Of course, we all want to purchase something that's highly profitable. But what were some of the softer things you were looking for in the practice that you were going to buy? What are some of the things that like, hey, this is something I'm willing to wake up every morning and tackle?
You're right. I'm thinking back to this was 5 years ago. This would have been 5 years ago, summer 2020, when we were doing this process. And what were some of the things that I was looking for? Mostly, I think my initial plan was to work as a solo office, so I wasn't looking into an office that had a whole army of doctors and a production well beyond what I was capable of doing myself. That was probably one of the first criteria. Two, I was looking at, I guess I was trying to find a sweet spot of production. I wasn't looking for, say, a fixer-upper of a practice that was like doing two or 300 or 400,000 a year that I was going to try to build up. But I also wasn't looking for the Taj Mahal that was doing 2.5 million plus per year that I, as a younger dentist, didn't think that I could produce. So I was looking somewhere in that range of, maybe 700 at the low to maybe just over 1 million at the highest, kind of maybe what I was looking for, that I felt comfortable that I could come in and not only recreate what was being done, but also room for it to grow. Um, Other criteria that I think more were just I was the benefit of the circumstance of where I wound up was the real estate that I had available, and that was a big part of it for me.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, okay, so those were the things that you were looking for. Did you have anybody whisper in your ear, an advisor, an accountant, an attorney? Like, did you put a team in place to help you execute this transaction? Like, who were the players in this?
Also a great question, and the answer is yes. I think as a young dentist, there's a lot of areas that are not our area of expertise when it comes to buying a practice and all that goes into it. So I did begin to assemble a team to help me with this process. That started with a CPA who I've still worked with to this day, was a great partner in this process that turned into working with the broker itself on the deal. And then I had already had a financial planner that I, been working with and kind of in place. And part of the deal, who was also just knowledgeable with the dental space. I think that's a great person to have on your team. And then it turned into the lender and all the other parts and pieces. But I think uh, I think those definitely were the core members of the team that helped me go from searching for a practice to, October 5, 2020, getting the keys handed to me and becoming a private practice owner.
Now, only share what you feel comfortable with. How did you structure the financing? Was this a bank note? Did you have to take a second mortgage? Like, how does typically somebody finance these type of transactions?
And it's been a bit since I thought a lot about these things, and I know your primary mission is to connect with people who are, younger dentists who are in this process. So it's bringing me back to these exciting, nerve-wracking times, but it's great reflection. The first part of that is the advice I was given was to start to save some cash and some capital to be ready for a practice purchase. So my first year that I worked as an associate, that was always in the back of my mind to not, actively hammer out all my student loans or to put it towards other things. It was kind of having some discipline to just kind of sit on a bit of a sum of cash, which might seem counterintuitive, but the advice I was just really given along the way was, you want to have this to basically be more credible to a lender, to have a cushion to survive, maybe a rough first month of practice. And so step one of that process was being financially smart with the money. As if I just got out of my residency program. I'd been a student for 9 years, and by golly, I got my first paycheck as a grown-up dentist, and it was just taking some discipline to know that I couldn't just blow this on anything that I wanted, and that was not the time to go buy the luxury car or the fancy watch. That the goal was at that time geared towards the practice, whether it was the one I was going into or the one that might have been, that it ended up being. But so step one was to be smart and start to save some capital. That was number one. And then as I started to assemble the team, it was just, showing myself as a credible someone to lend to. And that turned into what was able to produce as a dentist in my associate job. What did I have saved away, as I talked about a lot? And then ultimately what came into account was the practice. Was the practice a profitable practice that they felt ability to lend to? And fortunately, and there's probably other check marks that went into that whole process, but as I reflect on my journey to practice ownership, those were some of the big ones that came up along the way. And I can go into more details too about I did end up buying my real estate also at the time, which I was very fortunate to do. I did have some assistance on doing that part of it, but personally, what I had done as a year as an associate got me more than qualified to buy my practice itself.
That's interesting because, as a traditional financial planner, who, let's say I didn't work with practice owners, it would be rational for somebody to dump all their money in paying off student loans, maybe paying off some credit card debt. But the rational approach, keeping the end in mind, if I want to practice, I need to build up cash hoard. I need to make sure I have a level to, deal with the ups and downs. So I think that's really kind of a good perspective. And I would like to double down on that. You mentioned that you decided to buy the real estate that your office is on. So, a dental practice owner has a decision whether they want to lease over term or do they want to buy the land or build. Explain that decision and why did you conclude to what you concluded to for yourself?
One of the other things that drew me to the practice that I got in particular, where I wound up here in Wilmer, was I actually liked that it was a standalone building and that it was right on kind of our main drag of town and it's got great visibility. So I guess it goes to what actually drew me to the listing of the practice itself was kind of the visibility in that part of it. I think there's many ways to practice. You could be tucked up in a back corner office in the sixth floor of a medical building, or, like I said, or you can have kind of maybe more prime visibility. I'm not saying one is better than the other, and prime visibility doesn't just necessarily translate into a profitable practice. But that was part of it for me. And I ended up buying a practice from a doctor who was ready to retire. He was actually going to be moving away from the area too. And so, thankfully too, I think he just wanted to part ways with it also versus like being a landlord and collecting, rent from me and stuff. Might have been good residual income from him, but I think it allowed just the whole transition to be kind of a handshake and done deal. So, for the specifics of the practice purchase and the real estate purchase, it ultimately turned into kind of two transactions. One to buy the actual practice, equipment, goodwill, the other transaction being for the actual building and the real estate.
That's interesting. Now, explain. So you have to be a dental practice owner, serve your patients, you have to serve your staff and work with them. But now that you're a landlord, is there any incremental operational competency that you had to gain to say, maintain the land? I have to think about these things. Is it kind of like owning a home? What is your thought process around those things?
Buying a used practice had the benefit of a patient base and cash flow from day one. But I'll be honest, my quote around here is not, is something going to break this week? It's what needs to get fixed this week. I've learned that my skin has just gotten thicker of, hey, this is broken, this needs to get fixed, this needs to get maintained. And ultimately it just comes down to not redlining your practice bank account. You just have to be smart. You have to keep cushion. You can't bleed it dry. You have to just keep cushion in the bank account because things are going to happen. Things are going to need to get fixed. Things are going to get repaired. So the best piece of advice I can give to a practice owner is keep some cushion in the bank account because stuff happens constantly.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Now, you mentioned that you did an extra year of learning as far as implants. Explain the growth in implants like that. I've seen such a boom in just walking around the city, seeing people smile, people having implants. I see a lot more advertisement for implants. Why do you feel like implants have grown, and what is that opportunity for your business?
In my opinion, I think implants have become much more predictable. This does require the surgeon to know what he's doing and know the concepts of how to properly do the surgeries. But I think with how predictable implants have become, I think many more maybe periodontic type of treatments for teeth are becoming less common. Sometimes if we need to do, say, we have a compromised tooth that needs a crown lengthening. This is going to go a little bit technical, but a crown lengthening and a root canal and a buildup, and it still doesn't have a great prognosis, and that's going to run the patient $4,000. And I feel maybe more confident for $5,000 what an implant is going to do for them. I would say I'm starting to lean more into when I have a pretty compromised tooth on an individual basis. I've seen the predictability of what implants can do.
Mm.
Why do we think a lot of these have increased from both it's even been from individual things that implants can do. Implants can be used to just replace one, you're missing one molar, and that can be just your single replacement for that tooth, to someone who has been struggling with just dentures and just 2 or 4 implants on the bottom can then give that now an anchor for that denture to snap in and snap out of. And all the way to the biggest boom, which I would say right now is kind of this full mouth implant, all on 4, all on X. Basically, teeth come out, implants go in, and new teeth go in same day or next day. I think the biggest change has come of that has become with the technology that has allowed a lot of that to be done. And maybe how I think when someone has to lose all their teeth or they don't have any teeth, having fixed all on 4 teeth or all on 6 teeth is like truly like the best tooth replacement, aside from going with no teeth, going with a denture that comes in and out. So, but I think all the technology has really allowed those procedures to become more predictable, faster, and ultimately, like when those technologies also bring some of the costs down for us as dentists. So I think that's where a lot of the boom is coming from. Increase in technology, as well as how great of results that people can experience from I would say the biggest driver is function. In my area, the biggest driver for implants is function, to be able to chew. That's really the big one that patients come to me for.
Wow. So it's a big investment. We're in an economy with high inflation. Speak to the emotional side of somebody gaining a new smile. Like what happens to that person? How does that change somebody's life that they're willing to spend this type of money and make this investment?
My best advice to a dentist pursuing this or wanting to pursue this, and it's been advice that's been given to me, it's sometimes less going in and telling the patient what they need, and it's finding out what they want. It's going from a standpoint of finding what they really want. And this might even begin further upstream with how doctors or dentists are marketing or advertising. So if we go back upstream, one of the first things I do is I'm marketing for these patients, with radio ads, with our new website, with internet things, to basically look for patients who are they struggling with their teeth? Do they have a lot of cavities? Do they have a lot of broken or missing teeth? Are they struggling with their dentures? So number one, you're kind of casting out this message of like, are these the challenges that you're having?
Mhm.
Come on in for a consult and we'll see if there's something we can do for you. So that's step one. And then step two results in just sitting in the chair with them, a human being, and finding out what's important to them. And I would say it's somewhere in this list of things between ability to chew, embarrassment about missing teeth or the appearance of their teeth, pain, problems with maintenance of constantly having cavities, crowns, root canals. A lot of times you're going to find your answer in that realm, and a lot of times it's a combination of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. So, like I said, it's not an inexpensive procedure. How have you seen people finance this type of purchase? Like from a practical matter, somebody's listening to this and say, I kind of need this done. I'm tired of getting cavities. It's just the way my teeth are made or how my diet is. How can I afford such a large purchase, or have you seen people afford?
Absolutely. I talk a lot with patients, when I go through the cost of procedure like this, as we sit right now in 2025 at my practice, if someone needs top and bottom, all teeth out, implants, and all the way to final teeth, we do put that at $40,000. I mean, I've heard quotes for this procedure as high as $85,000. I had a gal come in for a couple months ago. And I often joke with patients though too, that like, I realize that's a big investment, and I don't take it lightly. But what I tell them is, I say, and most people don't come in here with a briefcase full of $40,000 for this treatment. Exactly. With procedures this high, I mean, like, I tell them, yeah, you can get a used truck for that. You can't really probably get a new truck for that anymore, but you can get a used, truck for that cost. At our office, we partner with a few third-party financing companies. I don't know if you want me to drop names or not on here. I guess you can decide on that.
You go ahead. You go ahead if you feel
I would say
comfortable with it.
some of the finance partners that we partner with, currently here in 2025 are Proceed Finance, Cherry, and then for smaller procedures, Care Credit still kind of has its place. So I would say that's probably it's probably a big part of our ability to provide these third-party financing companies who can help patients do it. Some patients will do a half and half. Some patients will do maybe a refinance on the home. Some patients might sell an asset. Some patients may get a loan directly from their bank. The more I've kind of been at this, the more I've seen how if this is what somebody wants, I've learned to say I try not to be somebody who's pushy and pressury and tell somebody they got to do this. What I more so is I look them in the eye and say, look, if this is what you want, if what you're telling me you want to be able to eat a steak, to smile big, and to get your confidence back, I believe that this implant treatment is going to be the best way that you do that. But I also want to make sure that you can pay your mortgage and buy groceries and make things happen for you. So those seem to be the tools. I haven't gone into saying, doing any in-house financing as a practice to this point yet. But those are probably just a few tools I think that people can utilize with probably the third-party financing be a great first place for people to start.
I like that. During our pre-call, we talked about moving upstream, doing more value-added services, increasing the margins. Speak to, somebody who's probably already in practice, your journey to maybe making your practice more profitable by deciding which procedures you want to leverage and lean on more than others.
I think this is a great question, and I think there's probably a couple of answers. The first thing I would say is, when I started doing a lot of this training in 2021, I did, some training with implants, and then I also did some training with kind of veneers and smile makeovers. And ultimately, what I found is I thought that they would both kind of take off in a similar, 50-50 ratio. And what I found is my patient demand, the implant and the implant type of reconstructions, I mean, it's probably 10-1 or 8-1, the number of ones that are implant based from a function or from a necessity standpoint versus maybe the ones more like a crown or a veneer type from a an aesthetic driven standpoint. So I think part of it, I mean, I think a dentist can create their path whichever way they go, but I think it would be foolish to maybe try to just swim upstream. And and if I have all these patients who are really desiring implants from a functional standpoint, and I'm just solely chasing like the cosmetic side, the demands of my community really spoke, and the implant-based procedures really took off. I would say 10-1 or 8-1 of frequency and patients that were saying yes to it. So I think it goes to a few things as a private practice owner as they look to add advanced services. I think number one is just maybe seeing what your market, kind of demands. Part of it is if you haven't maybe created that message yet, it's really hard to say, but maybe it's hard to be this cosmetic dentist in a very low income area. Maybe it's, maybe implants will take off more in a blue collar region where you have a lot of middle-aged males, a lot of missing and broken teeth. And there's other avenues that include, so there's obviously the cosmetic dentistry, there's sedation, which I'm just getting into kind of myself, there's implants, and then there's other things that go into sleep apnea, to Botox, and a lot of those things. So I think number one, it's got to be something you're passionate about, that you want to learn, and that you can become great at. And then number two, I think at least at some level, what opportunities present themselves. And ultimately what I found is the more advanced procedures that I've learned, the more that I enjoy it, the more that patients enjoy it. I did an all-on-X for a gal last week. I sat her teeth the next morning, and she gave me a big hug and was just in tears. And I hate to see it. I don't get that response as much when I do, say a single filling on number 30. But these types of procedures, I feel like they're a win in so many ways. They're a win to me intellectually, they're a win for our practice, and huge wins for patients to get life-changing procedures.
Like that. Now, just for the consumer, help us differentiate between a cap, a crown, a full set of veneers. Like, break those down, and if you can, break down how much you can charge.
Great question. So, cap or crown would usually be interchangeable terms. I say maybe a generation ago, maybe my older patients are used to the term cap. And I would say now more the term that I would say uses crown. Um, Basically, the purpose of a crown for the most part is a tooth that is either fractured, large amount of cavity to the point where we really can't add filling material to it. It's best to kind of cut our losses, to polish the tooth down, and then make a beautiful crown that basically cements over the entire tooth and protects it, like a caps or like basically a crown or a top hat that basically cements over the top. So that's ultimately what a crown is. When we think the term of veneer in the truest sense, it's mostly referring to a kind of light preparation of usually an anterior or a premolar tooth regarding mostly the front surface with the goal of mostly staying in enamel, which is the outer surface of our tooth, and mostly cementing a portion of bonding a portion of the surface with the goal of improving the looks or the outcome, or the mostly the aesthetic looks of the teeth. And that's usually done, in groups of little as two, but as you get into more of a smile, you're maybe looking at like 8 or 10 on the top, or all the way of doing all the teeth. So that's more what those look like. And prices for that can range from, your insurance participation with all the way to, it could be a low insurance reimbursement might be 4 or 5 or $600 to the people who are the cream of the crop, cosmetic dentists who might charge 3,000 a tooth. So that's just kind of at least a range of where those types of procedures can find themselves. And like I said, it's all along that spectrum for the dentist. Is their insurance based, and basically what's this dentist's kind of reputation and ability to charge what they feel that their time and their service and their ceramic is worth.
That's good. That's good. Throughout this conversation, you harped on one thing: technology. Explain your mindset on the adoption of technology, and almost like an advisor, like help people think about how they should be leveraging technology to increase how much they enjoy their practice, profitability of their practice, differentiation. So how do you think about technology?
Technology has been a huge transformation from Wilmer Family Dentistry as I bought it in 2020 to how we are as Authentic Dental of Wilmer in 2025. And to show how not only how fast things changed, I bought my first intraoral scanner in 2021, and I already bought a new one in November of 2023. And you might think like that's crazy. Was that a waste of money to only have the scanner for the year and a half? And I think technology is not a replacement for skill, but it is a great adjunct to skilled hands. And so if we think of technology in a few ways, I mean, it starts with, I think the most basic one that more and more dentists are adopting is the intraoral scanner. And the benefits of intraoral scanning, it's just basically getting away from goop and material and stone, and just really making it easier to, it's case in point. So you take an impression, and this is not an argument of saying that this is better than the other, but here's maybe just some of the limitations of it. You take an impression, it's got to go in the mail. Maybe you're sending it across the country. It's either getting really hot, really cold. It's sitting in a lab. It's getting poured up. In 3 or 4 days, it's maybe getting to the lab, and they're going to start working on it. And then they're sending that back to you in the mail. Whereas, you take a scan of something, it's sent digitally, and it can get to them, instantaneously. The scanning just allows to just have a lot of things digital for planning, whether it's Invisalign, whether it's single crowns and things which are the workhorse of a lot of what we do, and all the way into the advanced implant stuff. So I would say number one, it becomes a gateway for you to do more advanced procedures. And like I said, I'm not going to say it's a substitute for skill, but on the intraoral scanning standpoint, it does force you to become a better dentist because when you are preparing a tooth and you're looking at your intraoral scan of it and you're looking at it on the screen and you're zooming way in, you're looking like, okay, that's actually not that smooth around that area. I can't really actually see around this. And so it allows you then to, okay, I have to go back in, I have to make that smoother, I have to make that better. I can see, more data that comes from that. And then the technology goes from getting a nice intraoral camera to take pictures of teeth, all the way to a nice DSLR camera to take smile photos of teeth so that patients can see them in that light. And the technology keeps going up and up to all the way where I'm at now of, I was at a crossroads as I wanted to dive into this full arch implant game, and the last piece of technology that I needed at the time, the prices have come down now, was a $45,000 photogrammetry scanner to allow me to basically do these full arch implant cases at a high level. And I could have sat on the sidelines, I could have waited for costs to come down, but I made the decision at the end of 2022 that I was willing to make the investment in the technology because I knew it was going to help me get to the next level. And even though the tech is cheaper today, I wouldn't have traded it for anything because it got me in the game in early 2023 and got me doing these cases, and it made me better. So long story short, I think technology is a balance. You can't, I think, go out and buy everything all at once. It's kind of it's like a piece by piece game that fits your model and ultimately allows us to do more advanced procedures and execute them at a high level.
Like that, like that. Now, they always say in real estate, location, location, location. And you actually own the real estate. So it's like twice as much in your case. How did you decide where you wanted your practice? Did you think about that? Did you want it close to the city? You mentioned you could be close to a strip mall. You could be in a deluxe, office building, a standalone building. Like, how do you think about location, the exact spot where it's at relative to what's around it?
I think this goes on both the macro and the micro. I think at first and foremost, I think a dentist, if they're going to buy their own practice, I think they have to be at least at some level of a place that they want to live. You can have the most profitable practice, cash cow, whatever it is. But if it's in the middle of nowhere and the sacrifices that maybe you're far away from family, you're far away from things you like to do, I hate to say it, but even at the end of the day, if you're not happy where you are, it doesn't matter how much money you make in that practice. So number one, I think at some level, it needs to be an area that you actually want to live or within a commuting distance of where you want to live, regardless of how good the opportunity or how great the practice is. And maybe my view had changed on that, when I was younger. I think as a younger student with a mountain of student debt, I said, I would have gone anywhere. Number two, I think the next factor to think about is in areas where more people want to live. I think there does come just to be more, competition. It's not to say that you can't succeed in a big market, but what I need to do in rural Minnesota to market for implant patients and the budget that I spend on marketing, I mean, I would be like shooting a BB gun at a freight train if I were to try to use that in Phoenix, Arizona. Like it wouldn't work. The amount of money that I put into marketing, like I said, it wouldn't even make a ripple in the market that is implant marketing in Phoenix. So part of it comes into play there too, is if you're in a bigger market and you want to do more advanced procedures, with that is just going to become just more competition. It's just maybe going to be harder to break through in a big metro area than it might be an hour outside that metro area. So I think that's a big thing for me. And what I maybe found out even after the fact of my town of 20,000, drawing area of an hour all around, 100 miles, west of Minneapolis, is people have been looking for advanced treatment. They're willing, it's either, they go 3 or 4 hours to get to Minneapolis, or, even when I'm an hour away, they're like, I'm in Wilmer. It's not too far. It's only 45 minutes, or it's only 50 minutes. It's only 60 miles. So I think that part of it comes into play. And like I said, I'm not saying that anyone can't be successful in areas. It's just going to require a different thought process on ultimately where you are.
Makes sense. Make a lot of sense. So, as we all know, being a business owner is tough. And if anybody follows you on Instagram, they know that one of your hobbies is to stay in shape, to run. Um, Explain your relationship with working out versus balancing the stress of a business, because it's hard. I personally use it a lot as kind of my therapy. How do you manage stress working out? What is your relationship with that?
I was talking with my wife, and my wife runs the practice with me, and we just talked about how much we've grown as business owners since 2020 or 2021 to now. And early on, if one or two things would go wrong in the morning, I could take about one or two punches and then I would kind of be tapped out. And I've learned that resilience as a practice owner is like a muscle that you just get stronger. And, I'm not saying I bottle up my feelings and I don't think about them, but I've learned that like I can take quite a few sucker punches in the morning of things that don't go well. Somebody's not happy with this. This broke. This person has an emergency. This didn't go through. And that resiliency is something that's built as a practice owner over time. And it's like toughness, like a muscle. And to go back to your question about how fitness has become a big part of my life. It really started in 2021 Christmas. I mean, I'd always been somewhat active. I played high school basketball. I lifted weights through undergrad. But ultimately, this started with a small commitment of Christmas 2021. I said, you know what, 2022 is the year that I stopped talking about running a half marathon, and I sign up and I put it on the damn calendar and I make it happen. And I did that and I completed it. And I thought, you know what? I thought I would get that done and be like, all right, that's done. I'm done with running. I accomplished what I wanted to do. But it just kind of took off into its own monster of this passion that it came for me. And when I started running, the goal was like to complete a half marathon or to run a certain event. And what I found along the way was on the macro scale, the goal was to complete that event. But what I ultimately found is my daily running on the micro made me a better me. When I get running in the morning and I get my heart rate up and I'm listening to something positive, or I'm learning something, or I'm watching something as I'm running, it's just like my start for the day. And then I can come in, you know, um, I come into the practice. I like this analogy. It's, you can either be the thermometer of your practice, or you can be the thermostat. The thermometer just takes the pulse of around the room. And, if I were to just come in, and if it's Monday morning and people don't want to be there and they're tired and they're not feeling the Monday morning thing, the thermometer would be me to just come in and adapt to all where they are. And that's not, I guess who I am or how I run my practice. But when I get my workout in and it gets all these other habits in a line, I drink my green smoothie, I take my supplements, I do my journaling, my breath work, all that stuff in the morning, it becomes like my rocket fuel to start my day. And then I come in with a thermostat they're like, all right, Doc's coming in, he's fired up. I better not be this curmudgeon, slow moving, negative one. All right, if he's going to be positive and upbeat and going, I guess I got to at least try to meet him part way. But yeah, I love it. I love running. I love lifting, and I've had the ability to kind of complete some big events along the way. And I love the events on the big scale, but on the micro, it makes me show up better as a practice owner, as a dentist, as a human being, as a husband, as a father, as a friend.
I love that. My wife tells me all the time, like, if I'm not in a good mood, not in the right headspace, I think you need to go work out, because I am a completely different person if I'm well rested and well worked out versus when I'm not. That's big.
It really is.
So one of the areas of my specialty that I dig into is money and relationships. You mentioned how believe your wife helps out in your practice. Explain what it's like to have that support system. What has your wife done for you along the journey? Kind of think of things from an entrepreneur's perspective when it comes to having a spouse, because a spouse to an entrepreneur, that's a different animal and a different level of expectations and things they have to cope with as well.
I am incredibly grateful for my wife. I joke with her often that it would take a crazy person to love me. I have a lot of determination. I'm hardworking. I can be energetic. I can be I can be determined. I can be stubborn. I can be a lot of things. And so I'm very grateful that I have her in my life. And from an entrepreneur standpoint, I think we have to wear many hats. And, her and I have many relationships together. And we have the relationship together of how we run Authentic Dental of Wilmer, how she runs the front office, the schedule, and that sort of stuff. And I run, I'm the clinical lead of the back part. And we run that together. And then we have our marriage together. And then we have our I would even say baked in that we have a friendship together. And then we have a parent, then we have a parent relationship together. I think that having the right spouse, I think can really be like jet fuel for your life, or it can also be like walking around with a 60-pound ruck on your back. The person that you marry can either be your biggest supporter and cheerleader, or they can really be, like I said, an anchor. And so I'm very blessed to have who I've married. And from the business, specifically with an entrepreneur, if you're working with your spouse, you have somebody who's just as invested as you are. I love my team and my employees, but at the end of the day, any one of them they could text me right now and say, hey, you know what? I'm moving on. I'm not going to be at Authentic Dental of Wilmer on Monday. I love you, Doc, but I'm doing something else. I can't tell my lender that I'm not going to be here anymore. They'll say, that's great. Do whatever you got to do. We want our 10,000 on the first of the month through the remainder of our term. So when you have your spouse in the trenches with you, as committed to things as you are, it really just I think it's been essential to our success as we're closing in on year 5. And I'm sure you mentioned your spouse. I'm sure that's, like I said, a similar thing for you about how it's a combination of support, of connection, and yeah, but it's a constant fine line that I'm constantly trying to get better at too. At this phase, what do I struggle with sometimes? It's quality time, it's unplugging, it's being present. We just did go on vacation a couple weeks ago, and we went to Cancun for a few days, and I would say it was arguably the best vacation that we've taken together. And it really allowed us to reconnect and really not rebuild, but deepen that husband-wife and that friend connection. So a lot of stuff in that, but I hope you found some good stuff there.
I think that's really good. One thing that you mentioned is being the thermostat or the thermometer in your office. Talk about how you think about creating a corporate culture, because I think once you have employees, it's a completely different thing. So how do you show up so that your employees are maybe encouraged to show up in their best life?
I'm going to share 2 big things that I do every morning for our practice that I think everyone thought I was crazy when I started doing it, but it's been, I think, a staple of our culture of our office.
Yeah.
So the first thing I do is I'm a big person into personal development and quotes. And so every week I pick a quote of the week that I share with the team. And every day I try to spin it off in a different way. This week I chose the St. Patrick's theme. I said, the quote was, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I shared many themes of that. So number one, I always come in with some sort of motivational, inspirational, positive quote that I share every morning, and kind of a new application or a spin-off of it. And the second thing that we do as a team every morning when we start our huddle is we go around the circle, and I just say, hey, I want you to either share one thing that you're grateful for or an amazing thing that happened here yesterday. And what that does is, I feel like prior to doing this, people came in, it was just like, so-and-so's temporary crown came off, or this didn't come through, or so-and-so called and they're not happy with this, and it was easy for the negatives to start. And what I found was, by doing this, it's forcing them to think of something good. I know there's always things that are going challenging wise, but by always, every morning, when they go around the circle, everyone has to have either they thought of it 5 minutes ago, or they thought about it on their drive in, or they thought about it when they left. They thought about what's something that I'm grateful for, or what's something great that happened here yesterday. And those two things, I think, really just set our day off on the right foot. And I'll even add one third thing that I like to do is I like to do what I call a 5-star performance from yesterday. And I either praise somebody, and I have this tacky little name bag. It says 5-star employee, and it says, yes, my boss made me wear this. And if I find something that a patient ranted and raved about somebody left a nice review, somebody went above and beyond, somebody stayed to help a team member, somebody just did something, I like to just give them verbal praise in the huddle. And sometimes if I can't think of something, I say, I want to open this to the floor. I want to hear a 5-star performer. I want to hear a team member bragging on another team member. And, I found that those three things alone, I think, can get the boat moving in the right direction, even with challenges that will come.
One thing you mentioned is, they think I'm strange, but explain, like, as a business owner, you have to be a little strange, not only to desire to go out on your own, but the things and habits you have to survive. And it may be even different from, your other dentist colleagues who may work for just a larger company. So how have you embraced everybody looking at you different, your wife having to accept you being different, employees saying, yeah, that guy's off, but I love him? What is that like?
No one's ever asked me that. So I guess part of it is I'm often listening to podcasts and books and of people who are often, further along in this journey than me. So number one, I feel like a lot of the ideas and visions and things are drawing. It's kind of just coming in my ears usually every morning from other people that I'm listening to. I think as it pertains to what people think, I think I always joke about with my team, like, if they didn't want to hear the quotes and work for somebody who was like me, I said they probably would have left by now. So I think part of it too is just like I said, you asked us a lot about like what kind of creates the culture. And I think ultimately what it does come down to consistency. I could come in that one week and I do the quote for 3 days, and then by the last day I'm tired and I don't do it anymore, and then that kind of fades off. Like people, like, they see like consistency. You could say like, okay, last week I was the doc who blew a gasket and lost my temper, but like now I'm a new me for 3 days, and then you blow your temper again. It's, I guess, the best way, like I said, I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, but the culture thing, I guess maybe two quotes that summarize this well. One, this came from Nick Bear. This is a guy that I listen to. He says, we gain progress in drops, but we can lose it in buckets. You gain progress in drops, but you can lose it in buckets. And one other one I think kind of came from Warren Buffett along the same lines. He said this. He said, a reputation takes 30 years to build, but it can take 30 seconds to destroy. So many of the things that like you're trying to create in your office, it's like, if you want a culture of hard workers, like you have to be a hard worker. If you want a culture of practice that takes like caring about people and 5-star, service and going above and beyond, like you have to embody that. If you claim that you stand for excellence, but like you do shoddy work and cut corners, then you're not embodying that, and your team's not going to do that when you're not watching or putting putting your eyes directly on their work. So as far as the acceptance factor of it, I think thankfully the rewards of what it allows me to do in terms of travels and adventures and the things that I want to do, if people look at me a little bit strange and out there or crazy or for what I'm able to do, I think I'll take that judgment, I guess.
I like that. There's a trade-off, and yeah, I think it's worth it. Now, you mentioned, I went on vacation, had a lovely time. How do you think about work-life balance? My checklist never ends. I'm sure your checklist never ends of to-dos, of things you want to innovate and improve on. Like it goes on forever. How do you balance out, okay, I have to stop here today. I'm definitely going to bed at this time. I have this so and so that's important to so and so, so I need to be there. Like, how do you think about those things?
Randall, the work-life balance or life-work balance, as I've heard people put it, is it's a constant struggle, and it's something that I'm in the midst of figuring out for myself. And it's yes, it's been something I've constantly been dealing with and trying to fix since 2021. Currently, what my next vision for myself to do this, I kind of came to this conclusion last summer. I've been trying to do it in bits and in spurts, but I've kind of put some frameworks in place to how to hopefully in the coming months make it more possible. But I kind of just finally came to the conclusion that I wanted to, not I wanted to, I think for my best quality of life would be to go to a 3-day clinical week where I see patients 3 clinical days. And I've been trying it off and on for the last few months, but things have fallen through the cracks, demand, you name it, and I've kind of find myself kind of back and forth. But I ultimately made the decision a few months ago to bring on a dental therapist, which is a mid-level provider in Minnesota that can do. I found her; she's been with me a couple weeks now, and she is awesome. But I mainly wanted somebody to help me do fillings and some of these smaller procedures in our office to allow me the bandwidth to stay in those higher level procedures that we talked about, the implants, trying to get the IV sedation off the ground and that sort of stuff. So I found that no matter what I was trying with a long and drawn out clinical week, I no matter what I tried, no matter how much sleep I got or what I did, I just felt the same way and I just felt tired. I just finally came to the conclusion that this was the way that I wanted to go. So, like I said, it's been a work in progress from that standpoint. I think the other factor that I tried to do this with is I have an accountability coach that I meet with almost weekly, and we talk about, maybe he's even my pseudo therapist, but we talk about kind of all areas of my life, and I kind of tell him like, hey, this coming week, this is what my goals are. I want to make sure I'm doing this date night, or I'm making sure I'm going to take 2 or 3 nights to play with my daughter, or I'm making sure that I'm getting these training runs in. And I found that accountability is what I really needed. I basically pay somebody to talk to and tell them what I'm going to do between now and next Friday, and then doing it. It's really easy to not, to maybe the business is always going to take its first cut and its biggest demand. But if you let it, it allows it, it unfortunately can make many of the other areas, your report card and other areas really, really suffer. But it's a constant work in progress that I don't know if I have the full answer for, but it's, and I think for me, it's just finding out like what works for people. And, like for me, it's right now, it's kind of 4 clinical days. Friday is a lot of catch up on things and get ready for the week ahead. And I think the other areas that I'm trying to get better at is on the weekends is just it's being more present. And I'd say the biggest distractor that I think we all probably suffer with in 2025 is the phone. The phone is just so easy to be distracted to mindlessly look up and you've 20 minutes has evaporated for basically looking through worthless scrolling or looking up pointless things. And so the fronts that I'm trying to myself, and hopefully that this can resonate with other dentists, it might be the ability to maybe cut back some clinical time with the goal of being more efficient in the clinical time that you're there. That's number one. Number two, I think it's a focus on presence, and it's putting the phone on do not disturb, and it's kind of setting it away to try and just be present with family, kids, friends, whatever you're doing. And I think also just prioritizing kind of rest and recovery. I find that if there's weekends where I just go, 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 and I come into Monday and I haven't had some just rest, recovery, could be just sitting and watching a movie with my wife or us playing a game, I find that I'm definitely not as sharp come Monday. So hopefully there's some thoughts in there on my take on it. A student of life work balance currently. So
You mentioned something I can't get it out of my head. You mentioned, okay, I tried this, but then I figured out I had to bring on somebody. And there's a thing that we hear a lot. We probably listen to the same things. It's not how, it's who, right?
Okay.
How do you think about finding either the right person sitting at your front desk, the right, extra doctor in your office? Like, how has finding the right person kind of changed the game for you, even if it's somebody you're outsourcing a service to?
I don't know. Somebody once told me, hire slow and fire fast. And I guess what I've tried my best when I've met with somebody is anyone who we've brought into our office, I've tried not to have it just be like a stuffy corporate interview where we just read down a list of 20 standardized questions. I'm really trying to get a feel for who this person is, and I think what my wife and I have tried to do is when we've gone through this hiring process is I've tried to just be genuine with these people and see who we are and what we're looking for and just and being honest and wanting to get to know this person a little bit, knowing what their goals are, like when I brought on my dental therapist, I want to know like what her goals are for this position, what is like and just I think finding out what people, like I said, just kind of how I talked about how finding out what patients want. I think when you're bringing people in, you got to find out what they want. You got to find out, what is it? Why are they looking to make a change? Why are they considering working for your team? And I think it just goes into, like I said, just a lot of vetting. And I think the other thing that I've tried to implement too, when we've brought somebody on our team, it's bringing them into the office and having them come in and spend a day and meet the team. And I want them to see, do they feel like this could be a place that they could mesh, and does the team feel like this is a person that could come and mesh with them, because if they get some buy-in, I think they'll help support. I heard this from Brendan Burchard the other day, people support what they help create. And if you're getting your team's buy-in on who's going to fit in our culture, this is going to be your teammate. This is going to be your person who's going to help you clean up, that either they're going to help bail you out or you might be helping bail them out. So I think it's probably the biggest takeaway that I could say from that standpoint that I've tried to embody is getting teams buy-in on who you bring in as a team member. Because yeah, because ultimately it's going to be their teammate.
Gotcha. I like that. Now, what you mentioned you had a coach. What, and I'm sure you guys talk about this a lot. What is the growth strategy? Like, what have you seen is working from where you're located, how you operate, how you serve your patients? How are you bringing in clients on a regular basis?
And I'm actually just about in the process to start working with another coach. So I had worked with Justin Short of the lifestyle practice for a year, and he was a great mentor for me for that chapter, and I'm still in contact with him. And I'm actually just about ready to start with the next chapter with another great coach of a guy that I look up to. Um, I think one of the things for me, it was just having the faith to put money into marketing and advertising. I think that's the biggest for people who are looking to do a lot of these advanced procedures. Like you have to have the courage to do it. You got to and in our market, like I said, it's every market is going to be different. But what we've done for us, that's been a staple since day one, has been radio. People are gonna be thinking, where does this guy live if the radio is his major source of patients? But it's like I said, it's our market, our demographic of my wife and I we write them up, and we're on our fifth or sixth round of edits of radio ads, and each one I think gets a little more sharper and polished, but it's really speaking to the pain points that the patients are thinking. Like a lot of them are, hey, are you struggling with loose dentures? Do you have broken or missing teeth? Do you just know you need to do something with your teeth, but you're not sure where to start? And it's inviting them, so let's say phase one of this process is the marketing or advertising and finding a medium that works well for your practice. The other thing that we did in 2024, we did a full 5 patient testimonial, full video shoot, full website overview. You can take a peek at ours. It's wilmerdentist.com, WILLMAR dentist.com. But we went all in on a big project to really make a great website that would really attract, patients who are looking for these services. So step one is just getting the word out and having the courage to put yourself out there. I was having the courage to have myself play on the radio and people from high school or people I know that like listen and hear it. And then number two then is what we really incorporated is this consultation model. It's just, a no fee consult, and you got to realize like some patients are going to come in and be like, yep, I want the cream of the crop, and they're going to say yes. A lot of patients aren't going to show up at all. Some patients are going to be a solid maybe, and some patients are going to be a no. And it's having, the faith of doing that and sitting down with somebody for a no fee consult to spend some of your time and to give them their thoughts and to just be genuine and connect with them. And yeah, that's probably the other part that we've gone to with our model is, almost daily I'm seeing somebody for some form of consult and treating them well, finding out what they want. And some say yes that day. Some call back in a month and say yes. Some call back 6 months and say yes. Some call back in a year and say yes. And some will be, a no from the first few minutes. But you just have to have the courage and to put time and invest into seeing, consultation patients, but also doing your best to connect with them, show you that they care, that you care. And yeah, so I would say those are probably the two biggest areas that I would say have been for me, the courage to market and then the courage to do consults.
I like that. So you mentioned that you work with a financial planner. So speak on this from, kind of what your financial planner is doing well, and also some opportunities. Like, how can financial planners best service practice owners, dental practice owners like you? Like, how's your financial planner setting you up for success? What are some of those things that you're looking for in a financial planner?
Yeah, I think a financial planner is an important a part of your team. You're going to have you may or may not have a coach. You're going to have maybe an office manager. You're going to have all these resources that help you be successful. And I think a financial planner is a big part of that. And I think that goes into a couple of buckets where there's maybe some defense and also some offense. Hopefully a financial planner is helping you put into place like defense things. What I mean like that are making sure that you got disability insurance, you have life insurance, you have a lot of these things that necessarily aren't sexy topics, but making sure that you're set up and you're protected that way, and making sure you got your ducks in a row there. Are they putting their inputs on tax planning strategies? Tax, as a practice owner, you're going to have taxes are going to be a big cut of what you do, and are leveraging their expertise to help you try to be smart tax wise, and then ultimately having them help guide you or direct you or assist you or whatever their capacity would be from starting to invest standpoint of to making sure that the money that you make as a private practice owner, you're not just squandering or putting in a piggy bank, or putting in a piggy bank and burying it in the backyard, to make sure that you're trying to leverage their knowledge to try to have your money work for you. And ultimately, like I said, so you're maybe not chained to the handpiece until age 65 or 70. That with some wise decisions and having the right financial planner on your team really help guide you through where it is that you want to go with your career. So those, I think, are the essential components that that guys like you, Randall, can really serve dentists. We have our areas of expertise, but I think it's leveraging and bringing people on your team that with their areas of expertise.
I love it. And if somebody is listening and say, hey, I want him to contact me, I want to contact him, I want to work with him, what is the best way to learn more about your practice, your services, and how they can connect with you?
I guess if you're, from like, I guess I can probably put these in a couple of buckets here, from a patient standpoint. If they're, stumbling across this, my practice is Authentic Dental of Willmar, and we can be reached at willmardentist.com, WILLMAR dentist.com. That would probably be the best way to kind of connect, as a potential, say patient in that regard. And then, me personally, I've like I said, I've started to build this passion project that I call the Driven Dentist, and that's where like I've started my Instagram page, and I've just started sharing some of my clinical knowledge, some of my motivation and things that inspire me, and then as well as some of the running and other endeavors that I've completed. Most recently completed World's Toughest Mudder in November, and I completed 75 miles of obstacles in 24 hours. And I had it all kind of put together in an awesome documentary that I'm super proud of. But that one I can be reached either, like I said, I think best ways to reach me if it's whether it's a dentist or an aspiring to be dentist. I'd love to connect. On Instagram, it's at Driven Dentist, DRVN Dentist. I also have that on Facebook. Connecting with me personally too on Facebook, Trent Neisen would be great. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can also for the show notes and stuff, I could put my cell or email in there too. No, I would love anybody who's drawing either inspiration from this or took some things of value. If there's any other way I could be of assistance, I would love to be able to do so.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Trent Neisen. The information was authentic, real, I think actually practical as well. So thank you very much for your time today.
I'm honored. Thanks for reaching out. And like I said, thanks for investing your time with this too. I think you're making a great resource for dentists. And like I said, I'm hoping this helps you make your impact too. Thanks for the time today. Let's put a wrap on it.
Awesome. If you've been inspired to leverage your practice to create financial freedom, please schedule a consultation with Diesel Wealth Management. The legacy you dreamed of is a 15-minute phone call away from becoming a reality.
The more I know, the more money I can make.